All right. Heck yeah. Oh, you're not supposed to see this. Oops. I told you guys, I am not good at this. I am the literal worst. Oh well. Let's close that out. And let's make sure this is working, because that's just how I be. Should be fine. I'm just waiting to make sure. Do I have audio? Are we going to an ad? We're going to an ad. That's the worst. Okay, that's not what I need. All right, sorry for the delay. I am just not, I'm not good today. I'm a little bit off, you know. Uh, that air quality got me. I'm just trying to, boop, 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 live. There we go. There. All right. I just need to get the Twitch chat up. So if you're watching on Twitch, say hello to YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, say hello to Twitch. I like to get that little cross-platform stuff going. Today we're going to talk about my Dark Eldar and some games that I played last night and what my overall interaction was with it and my takeaways from it. So we're going to be diving into what units I had, how I used them, and how I feel about them now that I've already told you, right? Like I told you this is what I think about them, but now that I've played them, let's kind of come back around and see if my feelings were justified. Before we dig into that, I want to say that Games Workshop has finally announced the data slate. It will be early July, which I assume to mean sometime next week, because after next week we are hitting hitting mid-July. I am sorry for the coughing. The air quality joke was only partially a joke. I am closer to the Canadian border than I am to uh, a lot of things. I'm on the northern side of Indiana, so it's just Michigan that separates me from Canada. And unfortunately, Canada has been experiencing a lot of wildfires, and then that smoke has made its way down. We've basically been in a permanent haze or fog for the last week, and it's just not been a fun experience for me. I'm sure it's not been fun at all for those up in Canada. So if you're up north, I'm sorry for you. That is a tragedy happening, and hopefully it does resolve without further damage issues and, loss of life, things of that nature. So, but that is why I'm like kind of coffee and stuff. It just, unfortunately, that's where we're at. So, yeah, data slate's coming out. Really excited to see it. It's just in time for the league that I'm organizing. 2,000-point games at Drukhari. We're going to cruise through the list again real quick, and then we're going to kind of go through each thing that I played with, give you my thoughts on it now that I've played with it, and kind of go from there, talk about different strategies you could have, things of that nature. I've got a couple of other tabs pulled up here, so we can kind of go over some stats as well. And then the other thing I wanted to make sure we touched on was tournament play. I'm not going to dive into it too deeply because there is a big tournament pack, and I'll probably just do a separate video on that. But it looks like a lot of tournaments are probably going to be running fixed secondaries, which makes sense. And actually, boop. So if you look, and this is the Goonhammer site, those guys do a great job at collating data. So we can actually look and see like what each secondary was chosen, blah, 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 blah. So we'll get to that. So the Dank Elves list, that's just what we call them here. Sorry, we're a bunch of silly geese. I don't want it that way. We want it this way. Let's go 125. There we go. Now everybody can see it a little better, I think. We had the Archon, Drazar, Homunculus, Lilith. So I brought one of each, right? So I could start with 6 pain tokens. I'm not disappointed with that interaction. And if I had to take the Succubus or Lilith, I still think Lilith is the kind of like auto take. The only reason I would take the Succubus is because it's cheaper, and I just would either not give it an enhancement or just give it the enhancement that gives me a pain token. I didn't take that enhancement this game. I I wanted to see how the pain tokens interacted and how I felt about them before I was like, let's do this. I did give the homunculus the Crucible of Malediction. In every game I played yesterday, I completely forgot it even existed. So I'm going to need to do a better job of remembering it. But I feel like it could be very crucial. And we'll go into why it's not a horrible enhancement. Sorry. We'll go into why it's not a horrible enhancement in a little bit. Let me get some water. Maybe that'll help me. I'm dying here. I'm dying here. Maybe I'll go out back and smoke another one. Sorry. Now you guys are like seeing who I really am. You've all subscribed, and now that I have you, you get to see the real me. Um, Again, took Lilith. Battle line, Cabalite Warriors, and we're gonna touch on them also because I had some concepts after my few games, um, and I think those concepts are going to work well now that I've seen them on the table and how they interact. 10 mana racks to throw the homunculus in, and I'm telling you, like, I was not disappointed. Again, we're just running through this quickly, and then we'll go back and kind of talk about everything unit by unit. A unit of witches, 3 venoms. I didn't take a single raider, and I'm not necessarily disappointed with that. The raiders, I'm eh, eh. Hellions, I did take a lot of Hellions, like a lot, a big brick. And so they're interesting. Losing infantry kind of feels weird. I did a whole video that I'm going to be uploading today or tomorrow specifically on witch cult units. And we'll go into depth on that today as well as in that video. I took 5 Incubi, the Ravager, and then a big block of Reavers, which they were pretty solid. There's some interactions in there I kind of missed. But now that I see them, I understand a better way to kind of manipulate them and use them. Yesterday was my first day on the table, and sometimes for me specifically, like I can read it and I can see things that are good, but once I see it and visualize it, it's much better for me to go, okay, this is how it should work. And that's why it's so important for me to get games in. I can tell you till I'm blue in the face that something's good or bad, but once I see it and have a better understanding of its application, it helps me because I'm a very physical and visual person. Again, I'm at least fortunately intelligent enough most of the time that I can read it and understand it. But then once I apply it once, the the opportunities kind of present themselves because then I start to see different ways it could maybe interact. And I am like wrap hands, so a unit of 5 scourges, and then a unit of 2 Talos. So the one thing I'm going to tell you right off the bat is I don't tend to play spam. That's just not how I tend to play the game. It's just me. I might take 2 units of something at most, but I don't typically take 3, and I don't typically take 3 max units. Simply because if something's so good that it's getting spammed, it's probably going to get a points hike. And I have said it. Hey, what's up, Tyler? Thanks. Welcome to the stream. I have said it if not once, at least 100 times, right? If it's so good that it's getting spammed, it's going to get a points hike. And I would rather spend less time having to tweak and alter my lists than rely on something that's just inherently kind of broken or busted and then have to go completely back to the drawing board as soon as a data slate comes out, right? And a good example of that, Craft Worlds players, Proxy Hammer, I'm just playing with you, buddy. A good example of that, unfortunately for him, is Wraith Knights or D Cannons, right? They're just so inherently good in the way the army interacts with the game right now that they're getting spammed. One or both, or even fire prisms, right? Like you have these 3 very cheap, very efficient units that interact with the game in a very powerful way, and they're all getting spammed either together or as a single, right? And unfortunately, what that means is when this data slate comes out next week, there's a good chance all of those get some sort of points hike or rules adjustment. So now all these, especially the bandwagon Craft World players, are going to have to either hop to the next broken army or readjust everything that they're doing. Yeah, the index errata doesn't do anything. I'll cover that in a minute, Tyler. The index errata did come out. Let me finish this thought, and then we'll jump into just briefly touch on that. So they're going to have to completely scrap everything they're doing and start over. So, and effectively, if you're just the type of person who goes out and buys whatever the new hotness is, like, you're who GW likes in terms of making money because you're just constantly recycling your armies and stuff. Just slow down, pick one or two armies that you really like, and just learn to get good at the game, and then build up the codex enough that you have enough options that once something is broken, you can immediately switch it over to something else. Like, that is how I play the game. I have a lot of armies, but I only really play two. I'll throw Sisters on the table occasionally. I'll throw AdMech on the table occasionally, but I only really play Orcs or Drukhari, and that's because A, I really like the aesthetics of both armies, and I really like the way they feel on the table. I love Drukhari's table feel a lot. It is drastically different in 10th than it was in 9th, and that's okay, but I still like it. And I like Orcs because they tend to be very straightforward. So I have like my tricky, lot of movement stuff kind of army, and then I have my very straightforward army. That being said, let's touch on these index real quick. There was an index errata. For those that don't know, it literally doesn't change much in the game. It's mostly just correcting some keyword issues on index cards and stuff like that. Like removing the blast keyword from the Burna Boy's custom Mega Blasta. Or actually, I don't have it pulled up here, but it's just fixing some keywords issues. And unfortunately, like looking at the orc index and the errata, there is just so many more issues that weren't even addressed. So I'm sure other indexes are going to have the same problem. But it's not changing anything, it's just fixing and clarifying is all that was. Now, let's start with I'm going to save the Archon and the Kabalites for last, simply because they are probably going to start being the cornerstone of my army as opposed to Racks and Witches, right? Because in 9th edition, I was real big into Racks and Witches, and I still love them. They're still my favorite units in terms of like how I like to play the game. But unfortunately, right now, that's just not what Drukhari is about at a competitive level. And it doesn't mean you can't use them. They have potential, they have play, but right now, Kabalites really shine, and we'll kind of get into why. As far as the battle line goes, let's start there. As far as battle line goes, let's start with the Talos, since it's right here. Let's go over here, Talos. And if you are not computer, like, literate, okay, just a quick helpful tip for you. If you're running this on a PC, if you hit Control F, that does mean find, and it'll pop up a little search menu up top, which you can't see because it's cut off on my screen. But that will let you search for words, and you can actually do it on your smartphone too. It's just the three dots, find in text. All right, sorry, just got a text from my boss, but I'll read that in a little bit. It's we're going to Tacoma, so it's just prep for Tacoma. Okay, so the Talos moves 7 inches, still flies, is a monster, so they can shoot while they're engaged, but they can shoot out of engagement range or in engagement range. If it's a blast weapon, it can't target any units that are in engagement range. It is equipped with a twin splinter cannon and 2 macro scalpels. You can replace its twin splinter cannon with haywire blasters, 1 heat lance, or 1 stinger pod. They're all twin linked except for the stinger pod, which is weird. Let's look at the guns. Stinger pod, 2d6 shots. No rend. Heat Lance, very good, but this is not the platform you want it on, I don't think. The Haywire Blaster, to me, is what you put on him. And it was what I put on him in 8th, or 9th, I should say. I didn't play them in 8th. I didn't get into them until 9th. And that's just because one of my brothers got into them, and we just kind of learned it together, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this army. And then he ended up kind of play testing some craft worlds and ended up liking them more. So we just did like a big three-way trade to kind of get him craft world, get me Drukhari, and move some old models of mine out. Sorry, the ADD does keep me skipping all over. Okay. So the Haywire Blaster's anti-vehicle devastating wounds. I will tell you, this is one of the worst interactions in the game, unfortunately. But these are the tools that I have, so I'm going to use them. It's just a mortal. Yep. But it's just a mortal wound gun, right? If you shoot a vehicle and it wounds a vehicle, it's just a mortal wound gun. It's 2 attacks. It's ballistic skill 4, strength 3, neg 1, 3 damage. So every time it wounds a vehicle, it does mortal wounds. In a unit of 2, you're getting 4 shots. You're gonna empower them, right? You're gonna spend the pain token so you can reroll your hits to maximize your damage. It's twin link to maximize your damage on the wound rolls. So you're going to average 6 to 9 mortal wounds on a vehicle every time it shoots. If it kills a unit, it's empowered for the rest of the game. So it just rerolls its hits and wounds and charges and advances the whole game. So I think both games I got it empowered, but it died pretty. No, I don't think it died quickly either game. They're kind of chunky, actually, even though they're only T7, 7 wounds. The 5-up Feel No Pain and the 3-up base save with the reduction in AP can keep it on the table a little longer than it should. And, the Feel No Pain does give it some sort of protection from the mortals. So I'm glad that they kept the Feel No Pain. And these things are cheap. Like, they're way cheaper than they should be. I think they're 90 points a model without looking. I can just pull it up. Let's pull it up. Let's pull up points. Boop. Talos. All right. So Talos, yeah, 90 points a model. Let's zoom you in. Where's my zoomy zoom? There we go. Out one. So the Talos, 90 points a model. Very, very good for their points. Unfortunately, I think you just it took like 4. I think they didn't die until like 4 when we ended the game. But it took you blasted at them every shooting phase. And I think it was just constantly shooting at them, Tyler. Let's go back here. Let's pull this over. All right. I've looked at some competitive lists. Most competitive lists are running 6 of these. So thanks a lot, competitive players. These are about to get a points hike. If they won't get one this data slate, then they'll get one the next. So thanks. That being said, I don't blame tournament players because, again, I am a tournament player. I do play competitively. I just try not to spam. That being said, Drukhari is not doing well competitively. So there is a chance they don't get a points hike. There's a chance that other things just kind of get a points reduction. And that's what I'm hopeful for because Drukhari is towards the bottom end of the meta-analysis right now. I think they're sitting around 39 to 40% win rate. So they're towards the bottom end of the meta-analysis. They're not doing well. And we'll kind of talk about why in a little bit here also. Talos, auto include. If you have them, put them in your Dark Eldar lists. They're going to do the Lord's work. They are very useful. I ran mine with 1 gauntlet. So I got my 5 attacks, and then I ran it with a liquefier gun. And I forgot that it was twin linked, but I don't think it mattered either game. So I had the Haywire Blaster, a liquefier gun, and then I had the gauntlet. I don't know that that's the best loadout. I might consider chain flails and the gauntlet just so I have something for chaff units. Like getting 8 attacks into chaff units could be helpful. But I was not disappointed with the gauntlet loadout, especially because once it was empowered, I was just re-rolling hits. Was not bad. So yeah, to me, these are an auto-include in your list. Definitely want them. Scourge is going to be another auto-include. I'm sure other people have already mentioned that. Boop, boop, boop. And again, so when I ran these, I gave them the Heat Lance. And basically, I brought them. I brought them out of Deep Strike one game, and then I kept them on the table another game. The first game, I forgot that they could move 6 inches after they shoot. Probably could have kept them alive longer had I remembered that. That's my fault. Um, my dice were really bad. You're not wrong, Tyler. I was trying not to mention that on the stream, but because you did, I will. So I played Tyler the first game, and he's not kidding. Like, there were times where I was hitting on twos, wounding on twos with, like, let's call it 6 attacks, and I'd just get 2 wounds in, and then he would make both his saves. Like, it's just the way the game went. Fortunately, I was able to look at what I did wrong that game. I did lose it. Tyler did a great job playing and capitalizing on both my mistakes and just the poopy dice. And he got a win. So good on Tyler. I think that's going to be your one for the year, buddy. And you know, we'll kind of go into the mistakes that I made and talk about that also. Maybe we'll get the drawing pad up. This might be a longer video, so I hope you guys you got your popcorn, because let's fucking go. And I don't usually drop that word on my stream, but we're doing it today. Let's see. And you're shooting Scourges, so they can move 6 inches. So they can actually come out of Deep Strike, shoot something, and then move 6 inches because it's in the shooting phase. I gave them Heat Lances just because I wanted this interaction right here, Strength 14. Strength 14 is a lot more versatile than Strength 12 is, for one, and also a lot more versatile than Haywire's, because they're Strength 3 but they're anti-vehicle. So what happens if I hit demons and they got a great unclean one? What happens if I hit nids and they've got a hive tyrant, right? Like, what do I have against monsters? And that's interesting that this army doesn't have a tool for that, because historically they have had. So I'm kind of surprised that there isn't at least a stratagem to give, like, splinter weapons anti-monster, even if we can't use it on vehicle like we used to. That one kind of shocked me. So not having much in the way of tools for monsters was kind of a surprise. So I wanted to make sure I had that and use the Heat Lance as my tool. I can see bringing 2 units of them. I personally wouldn't bring 3, but that's mostly because I'm still a fight phase player first, and I want those melee interactions. But I feel like Drukhari is sitting at a very shooty army right now, and I think a lot of lists are going to bring 2 to 3 units of Scourges. If you're bringing multiple units of Scourges, you're going to want at least one Heat Lance, I think, because of the Strength 14, because of giving you tools for fighting monsters. So if you're bringing 3, I would probably suggest 1 Shredder and then 2 units with Heat Lances. The Shredder being 18 inches and Torrent with D6 shots and Strength 6 gives you a pretty good anti-infantry weapon. You'll chip wounds on Marines. You probably won't delete squads unless your dice are amazing and theirs are ass. But it gives you a tool if you hit Eldar. It gives you a tool if you hit Tau. It gives you a tool if you hit anything with, like, low toughness bodies. Like if Tau's bringing Breachers or the other things. Strike teams. They're just Fire Warriors. They're all just Fire Warriors, but they're just Fire Warriors in my head. Like anything, any army that has it. Sisters, you could use it for Sisters. Yeah, they have a 3-up save, but if they fail it, they just die. So, and Strength 6 means it's going to work pretty well into a lot of things. And because they can't claim cover against it if they have a 3-up save, again, you're going to chip wounds. Like if you're shooting at Marines, let's say you've got 4, you're going to average 14 shots. Do we need more anti-infantry? Scourges are a premium anti-vehicle. You're not wrong. I'm saying if you run 3 units of Scourges, I would consider the Shredder just because of the volume of dice. You could definitely bring three units with Heat Lances, and there's nothing wrong with it. And it really is going to depend on how your list is made up, James. If your list is geared up to just simply take down vehicles, which there's nothing wrong with that at all, especially with the state of the game right now, then you want the Heat Lances. Maybe one unit with Haywire, just so you can have that mortal wound cannon. The only reason I would personally take Heat Lances on them is that you can get Haywires on the Talos, and then the Heat Lances give you the tools for the monsters. So, but and again, I'm not telling you not to run Heat Lances. I'm just making a case for the Shredder actually being a solid unit or a solid gun. That's all. But yeah, Scourges, I would bet 2 to 3 units in most competitive lists. I will probably run 1 to 2 personally, and that's just because of, again, how I like to interact with the game. I will literally smash my face against a brick wall trying to make my melee units work. That's just who I am. Reaver's gonna be another auto include, like, until something happens with the way they interact with the game. Okay, what happened there? All right, Reavers. Shred it, bro. You're right. Yes. The so bikers, interestingly, and again, that's where the shredders kind of come in. Is I know a lot of bikers have decent saves, but it's just so many dice and it auto hits, so you don't have to spend your pain tokens on them, right? So that's again kind of where that shredder interaction comes in. Not that it fixes it, but it at least gives you a better tool for it. Um, Reavers. And then Reavers, obviously, like these things are so good. In a unit of 3, you can take a Heat Lance. In a unit of 6, you can take 2 Heat Lances. If you're an MSU kind of person, that's fine. Take your 1 unit of 3 or your 3 units of 3, whatever interaction it is you like. I didn't mind the big unit of 6, getting 2 Heat Lances out of it, spending a pain token when I needed to reroll their hits. One of the interactions that I kind of missed the first time I used them was the way their eviscerating flyby works. It's each time this unit ends a normal move, you select one enemy unit and then roll a die for each model in this unit, and on a 4+, they suffer a mortal wound. Um, and then for every 3 models, you can either give them 1 Caltrops or 1 Grav Talon. So you could actually take 2 Caltrops if you want to. And what the Caltrops will do in a unit of 6 is let you re-roll 2 of these flyby dice, right? So if you move over a model, excluding monster and vehicle units, but this is also where, like, James, what you said, like, this is a decent way to at least put some damage on some bikers, if you can get it, is you can fly over them once in your movement phase, and you'll average, if you've got 2 Caltrops, you're going to average 4 mortals. But you can also fly over them again in your shooting phase, and that should count as a normal move. Let's double check that strat, just so I don't become a liar. Boop. All right, so stratagems. Strike and fade. Yep, you immediately make a normal move. So you could fly over them in the movement phase, do 4 mortal wounds, and then you could fly over them again in the shooting phase and just do mortal wounds, and you'll still get to at least shoot them. So again, you're basically doing 8 mortal wounds on average with this unit if you've got the command points to pull that off. That's going to give you a little bit of tools against things like your bikers. Walkers generally have the vehicle keyword, so it's not going to help you there. And it won't work on monsters either, so it's not going to help you there. But having the 2 Heat Lances will help you with those other things. So it's one of those where if you've got the command points and you can basically just spend 2 command points to average 8 mortal wounds in a single turn, if you can get that to do what it needs to do, it's going to do enough damage that your opponent is not going to be thrilled with that interaction, right? So, personally, for my test game with them, I ran them with 1 Grav Talon and 1 Caltrops. The Lance ability makes them Strength 4 plus 1 to wound. I don't know that I would ever do that again, simply because that's only going to be really good into like Termagants or Battle Sisters or Defenders or Storm Guardians, right? Like these low toughness models, that's only going to be good into them. If I smack them into a Space Marine unit, cool, man. Maybe I kill a Marine, and then I just pick up my whole squad to a bucket of dice. So probably just going to keep them as a ranged kind of harassment unit rather than run them as I did last edition in tandem with Hellions and just like smash them into things. So again, Reavers, really good. The eviscerating flyby, you can manipulate that to do a little bit more damage so that they kind of hit above what they should be. At T4 and 2 wounds each, they're not going to stay on the table super long, especially if they get charged. So you're going to want to try to keep them out of melee. The Ravager, I'm mixed on it. I was not a fan of them in ninth, and I had buddies that were like, those are really good, and I was like, man, I'm not a fan. Is Fire and Fade, it is a normal move. I just actually checked it. Here, I'll pull it up and put it on the screen. Your unit can immediately make a normal move. I actually, before I committed to saying that, I wanted to make sure I checked it, and it is what it is. Yes. But thank you. I appreciate you asking. I did verify it. Yep. All right. So the Ravager, if this each time this model makes an attack, it rerolls a hit roll 1 if it's at its starting strength, and it's just 3 Dark Lances. They're not super expensive, right? They're, what are we looking at? Ravagers, 95 points. They're not super expensive. Yeah, and that's it. Is like having one is definitely useful. Um, I'm super mixed on it. It definitely has, like, the Dark Lancers are good enough that people have to respect them, and they can do damage. And it's just one of those where I don't know. I wasn't a fan in ninth because I just felt like 3 Dark Lances was a little underwhelming considering how fragile the chassis is. Like, it's such a scalpel type unit. And then, like, if you don't kill whatever it's shooting at, you're just kind of up shit creek, and then you're probably picking it up. So I'm kind of mixed on that. I've got some ideas for Raiders that I think are going to be, I don't know if they'll be good, but they're going to be fun and they're going to be funny. And we're going to cover those when I'm done. And also a Tantalus. So I've got some plans for the old Tantalusy. Just got here. How we feeling about 10th so far in general? So 10th, we'll take a pause. Actually, we'll take a pause. This is a good time to just kind of stop for a second, and we'll talk about 10th. The good Harold over on Twitch asked how I feel about 10th in general. 10th is a mixed bag right now. The missions are fantastic. The way the missions interact is phenomenal. The drawing a random priority mission, drawing a random deployment zone, and getting different mission bonuses is a phenomenal interaction that keeps the game feeling a little bit more fresh than arguably it should. I call it the illusion of variety because you don't actually have variety, but it feels like you do. And that is a fantastic interaction. Generally speaking, the core rules are pretty good. Cover has been simplified. It's almost too simple at this point, but because it's so much easier, uh, in some ways it's just a better interaction, right? The Holy Within on the terrain features is kind of weird, but overall, like, I can't complain about cover and how it interacts. Where I think 10th kind of shit the bed is the way the indexes are written and the way they interact with the game. Because you have core rules that on paper are fine the way they are, but then you have certain indexes that can manipulate them in a way that's just like kind of shitty, right? Like, it's kind of, it's not fun. It's very one-sided, and I'm not trying to pick on Craft Worlds, but Craft Worlds are unfortunately one of those armies right now. Custodes kind of in that same boat. Like the one-sidedness of some of the armies and the way they're written. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have armies like Death Guard or even like Drukhari right now, where competitively they just can't hang because they don't have these weird manipulations or interactions. So it's a mixed bag. I think after a data slate or two, I think 10th will start to hit its stride. I also firmly believe that GW is basically using the indexes to alpha and beta test, similar to the way a video game company would, and then use that to create their codexes. And I'm not opposed to that as an interaction. I'm opposed to that because it wasn't presented that way. When you're selling index cards, you're telling me this is a finished product, but it's not a finished product, and we're obviously in some sort of alpha beta testing. And I feel like if as and again, I'm an employee and I'm saying this, and I don't know this for certain, so don't be like, well, Chris said this. I'm just giving you an opinion. I just feel like as a company, if they would have said, hey, we're going to release these indexes and we're going to take all this data and we're going to use it to try to create much better and more balanced codexes. By and large, the community would have been like, hell yeah. And there wouldn't be so much backlash about how imbalanced everything is. But because it was presented as a finished product, therein lies the biggest issue, right? But that's enough of my rant on the state of 10th. Let's get back into what everybody else is here for. Hopefully that answers your question, the good Harold, and you understand where I'm coming from with it. All in all, I've only had like one bad interaction though. Like for the most part, everything's still been fun. Hell yeah, dude. All right, so we're yeah. Ravagers. I'm telling you guys, the ADD is real, and that's not a joke. Incubi. Um, man. Yeah, I know, Tyler. I know. The dude's like the size of my pinky and for some reason is T8. Gaskell looks like a Coke can on the table in his T6. Don't get me started. The Incubi. So let's take a look at them. They're an interesting unit. That is not how you spell Incubi, friend. Gosh. All right. And we'll cover Drazar while we're doing Incubi because they kind of work in tandem. Because I will tell you, Incubi by themselves, not super great, but Incubi with Drazar are actually a legitimate threat to a lot of things on the table. Now, the Sergeant gets Demiclaves, and that just gives you basically like a striker sweep profile. You can either do 6 attacks or 3 attacks. And then everybody else gets 3 attacks, strength 4, neg 2, 2 damage. So honestly, Incubi didn't change a ton. They went from neg 3 to neg 2, and then they lost their bonus damage and they lost their bonus AP on a wound roll of 6. Outside of that, they didn't really change a lot. They did lose this, though, and this is huge. Because now it's just at the start of the fight phase, each enemy unit within engagement range of one or more units with this ability must take a battle shock test. That's inherently poopier than Fight Last, right? The only thing that's really going to do is if they fail it, it prevents them from using stratagems, which don't get me wrong, that could be very good because that could keep them from like an interrupt or something along those lines. But there's also no modifiers to it, so a lot of things are going to average passing it. And I'm not complaining, it's better than not having any ability at all. It just, in the context of 10th, it's fine, but when comparing it to how they interacted before, it's a little disappointing. I feel like this is a unit that should arguably have a fights first mechanic rather than a battle shock test. But that's just me personally. They have a 5-up invuln, they have a 3-up base save, and that's it. You can take up to 10 of them. So yeah, if you take 5 of them like I did, You're only rolling 15 attacks. They are power from pain, so you can empower them. But again, they're not scary by themselves. Like, yeah, it's 2 damage. My first test game was with a Wraith Force. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't use anything Craft World as a good litmus test for how good your list is. They're a bit bonkers. They're very underpointed right now. So really, James, I wouldn't. I would try to find something that isn't Custodes, and I would try to find something that isn't Eldar to play against and see how you feel then. And then the Good Herald, I agree, but I also feel it should be true for a few more units. Generally, they really sap that from the meta along with melee over. I agree, man. Um, and that's the thing is like, I can look at their melee profile and kind of be like, gosh, this is ass. But then I can also look at it in the context of 10th and go, okay, this is actually not terrible, right? Um, if I slap them into infantry by themselves, they will probably decimate whatever infantry I slap them into. So I can't complain there. Um, the main thing is that they just lost a lot of their versatility because I can't slap them into vehicles as readily. Now let's go look at Big Dick Drazar. Hopefully that doesn't like get me flagged on YouTube. And that's just what we call him, colloquially, right? So that's his nickname in our play group, and a lot of that has to do with I love him. He comes to every game, and he's just silly. So he's got a strike and a sweep. He either gets 5 attacks, strength 6, -2, 3 damage. So again, his rend went down, or AP, sorry. I'm an old fantasy player, so it's all just rend to me. Or he gets 7 attacks, strength 5, -2, 2 damage. So again, I think Michael says, hey everyone, learning about Drukhari, hoping to learn about how to play well with them in 10th as I really like them more in 9th. Well, Michael, hopefully I can help you out. If I can't, hopefully the community can. But I'd like to think I can give you some insights and help you out a little bit. That's why I do these videos so that you can learn from my mistakes and kind of move forward. If you're new to the channel, there's a lot of times I'll bust out the drawing pad and we'll actually like set up a full ass table on a drawing pad and I'll kind of walk you through some of the interactions also. And depending on time, I may end up doing that for a bit today, but we're already 45 minutes in, so we'll see. This could just be like a big long one, whatever. But again, welcome to the channel, buddy. So Drazar, I think Drazar is the bee's knees. Switch Drazar for Solitaire Ally. Yeah. I can't argue with that. I'm not a Harlequins player. I don't own a Solitaire, so I haven't ever really bothered to look at it. I can tell you that Drazar with Incubi will put damage out. It will happen. He's not as utterly bonkers as he was in 9th, but again, none of the melee is. So I think the next time I run him, I'm gonna put him with 10 Incubi, and I'm gonna put them in a boat. Is where I'm looking at. I'm putting them in the Raider, and that's because like 10 Incubi, you're gonna get 3 attacks each. You're gonna throw 30 dice. You can empower them to reroll. They're going to put damage. I did. I didn't get to with him. 100 greets from Switzerland. Well, thank you. Yes. But no, I think he's solid. I don't know that he's an auto include for armies, but I think for the way I play, he's a unit that I'm going to lean on, especially as witches kind of fall to the wayside right now. And witches will kind of cover when we get there. Basically, it's going to boil down to they're just overpointed for what they do. And arguably, Drazar may be a hair overpointed, but I don't think it's much. But I do think that Incubi are probably a little bit too expensive for what they do. And really, again, not much. Like at 85 points for 5, 170 points for 10. You're talking about 17 points a model. If you drop them down to 15 points a model, I feel like Incubi are actually really solid. At 170 or 17 a model, it's arguably hard to justify them. But again, I had good interactions with them. But as a person who is a fight phase first player, I'm much more accustomed to understanding how to get them there and where they need to be. Where I struggled was like how to use my Kabalites more effectively because I'm not a shooting player, right? I did slap him into a couple of big units, and by big, like killed a vehicle with him in the 5 incubi. Uh, did not kill 5 homunculus or 1 homunculus and 5 racks. And again, like Tyler said, like my dice were betraying me hard, but it is what it is, man. Like he arguably should have killed all of the racks and the homunculus between him and the 3 cabalite or incubi that were left. He didn't. Is what it is. We move on with our lives. Um, I ended up winning that second game anyway, by like 20 or so points. It was a pretty high scoring game. But I think Drazar, like I said, if you're a fight phase player, you take Drazar, you take some Incubi. As homie from Switzerland, I got to move my phone so I can actually see your name because it's real hard here. Basti, you tell me. Which is it? Law, like ah or eh? I'm American, so it's going to be ah for me, right? I got some buddies from England who make fun of me all the time. They're like, it's not bath, it's bath. So, you know, the solitaire, I'll probably look into it. I've had a lot of people tell me, hey, man, you should look into some Quins for allies, and I probably will. And I'm also going to look at my Yanari stuff once the data slate comes out. I didn't want to dig into it until after the data slate, just because uh, I just don't want, that's not where I want to be, right? All right, what do we got here? He said, bam. I hope that means it's Basti. Bam! All right, dude. So that's Drazar. Like I said, 100% will take him again. Can't recommend enough as far as like having a good punching unit. We lack that in our index right now. The units that we had that could do it didn't really get better at it. They kind of either stayed the same or got first. One question on Scourge is 120 for 5 models is a lot of points for a unit that dies easily. Aren't Dark Lances better than a Heat Lance because of the extra range means your Scourges stay alive? So that's not a bad way to play them. The only reason I personally would take the Heat Lances is because I would want the Strength 14. There's a lot of T12 and T13 hitting tables right now, and wounding on 4s and 5s with a unit that's going to hit on 4s unless you sit still is going to be rough. If I don't have Drazar, I got 10 Incubi, would you imagine I get one? Or I mean, they're going to be okay without him. Here, real quick, let me get to Julian, and then I'll get to you, Michael. So Dark Lances are going to arguably be better for the extra damage and the extra range. The main thing that you're going to need to worry about with them is Overwatch, and you're going to want to try to fish that out with other things, or use your Archon's ability to just be like your Overwatch. The first time somebody does it, just be like your Overwatch costs an additional CP, get fucked. And that's what I had to do. Because with a bunch of T3 infantry models on the table, I can't live through somebody else's Overwatch. And so I had to just use the Archon ability to be like, if you want to Overwatch me, it's going to cost you resources. And that took a lot of pressure off of my army and allowed me to kind of maneuver them and move them. Now, the Archon's ability does affect, like, the Space Marine Captain ability. So, if you're playing against, like, a CSM or a Space Marine army where they're relying on those Overwatches to kind of chip you down, and I've seen some builds that do it, uh, that strat goes from costing them 0 CP when they use the ability to 1 CP when they use the ability, and then 2 CP if they don't use the ability. So again, these resources that they would normally be getting for free, you're taxing them for, and that does kind of help keep your models on the table. there might be better targets for the Archon's ability. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying the games I played yesterday, that was very key in keeping my guys alive. Um, and again, like right now, the Heat Lances, the only reason I take them is because of the Strength 14. There's nothing wrong with Dark Lances. I would honestly say that's a 50-50 toss-up, and it's going to be matchup specific, right? Um, Yesterday, I think I don't know that I hit a T12 unit, but when I play today, I'm hitting a T12 unit. I'm hitting 2 or 3 of them. So I already understand that interaction. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, Julian. So hopefully that kind of answers your question. Neither one is a wrong answer. It's whatever gun you feel fits what you play against regularly. And I don't mean tailor your list, but like if you're in a region like I am, where there's a lot of Knights players in the Midwest of America, there's just a ton of Knights and Chaos Knights players. So there's going to be a lot of T12 and T13. So I'm just taking Heat Lances. Whereas like you might play in an area where there's not a lot of Knights players, so you don't have to worry about it as much. So the Dark Lances might be better suited for you. And that, like, when you look at the meta and stuff like that, like, you got to remember your metas are actually regional first. So if you're only going to local tournaments, if people aren't really playing Knights, you don't have to worry as much. And then, all right, Michael, back to your question about Incubi. So here's why I think you get Drazar, but I don't think you're wrong to take them without him. His special ability is while he's leading a unit, the whole unit adds 1 to their wound rolls. So those and those strength 4 neg 2 damage attacks now get +1 to wound, which means T5 through T7 you're wounding on 4s, T8 and above you're wounding on 5s. So that's gonna allow them to kind of hit above their weight class better than they would without him. But if you don't have him, absolutely take a unit without him, right? Because again, you're going to want at least one melee unit. You It's not a game where you can rely solely on shooting. Even Tau can't rely solely on shooting. All of the best Tau players that I've seen understand the need to charge and to get into engagement range. Yeah, go ahead. So with Drazar, right, he gets both weapons and you pick which one he wants. And then the sergeant gets both profiles. You pick which one you want to use. So you want one sergeant that has two swords, and then everybody else will have the two-handed weapon. Because the sergeant will either get the two-handed profile or the one-handed profile. You pick when you make your attacks. So when you've got your Incubi, you're going to have per unit one guy with 2 one-handed weapons, and then everybody else will have the two-handed weapons. And then Drazar, like I said, this little arrow right here, I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor, but these little blue-green arrows here, these Incubi Darkness arrows, one might say, they just tell you that you pick which profile you use when you make those attacks. So like if you charge Drazar, you get to decide whether you use his single blade or the dual blades. He gets both. Yeah, and Lilith, she's getting covered today. So I'm glad you brought that up, buddy. All right, so also, real quick, I want to thank everybody for hanging out with me before we dig into this a little bit more. Really appreciate the turnout we had today. You guys are awesome. Thank you. We talked about Incubi, Hellions. We're going to briefly touch on them. I'm not going to dive super deep into them unless there are questions on them. Simply because I did a whole video on witch cult units that I'll be putting up either today. Well, by the end of the weekend, it's going up because I'm running an event Saturday, so it may not go up today. Hellions, so they move 14, they fly, they're T4, they're 5 up save, 2 wounds. So again, the base data sheet didn't change a ton. Their splinter pistol, your sergeant can get, and then splinter pods. They are anti-infantry 3, assault twin linked. Their melee is okay because, again, it didn't really change a ton. They did gain sustained hits. The downside is that all the witch cult stuff lost combat drugs. And because they lost combat drugs, there's nothing you can do. Like, literally, Games Workshop copy pasted the Hellions datasheet and then cut out all the special rules for Hellions that made them really good. They can get the grenade keyword, which just lets you use the grenade strat, which is kind of a weirdly worded strat. But I'm not going to dig into that one right now. They can still fall back and charge. For one command point, they can advance and charge. I appreciate it. I try not to speculate. I will usually do like a preview video, James, and then I try to do a review video afterward. Almost like, because I was in the military, right? So I kind of do a preview and then an after action review. Did things go the way they were supposed to? What happened? What should have happened, etc. So the Hellions are weird because they lost the infantry keyword, and I honestly didn't notice it until we started playing. And thankfully it didn't matter. Like, I saw it turn 1 of my first game and was like, oh shit, these are mounted now, not infantry. And that's a double-edged sword, right? Because now anti-infantry won't work on them, but at the same time, they don't get to fly through walls like infantry do. So it's kind of a weird interaction. I wasn't disappointed with them, but I don't know that I take them until they get a points drop. Because Hellions are spicy with points. The Hellions here are 220 for my 10-man, and they need to drop probably down to about 200, right, for 10. And that's a 2-point per model drop. I really think if they drop 2 points a model, their viability goes way up. They have a lot of utility if you play them a certain way. And their melee isn't terrible, and being able to advance and charge them will get them into places that they probably shouldn't get into. And so there's, again, it's this weird interaction where I'm on the fence about them. They're really solid because they have assault weapons. If you take 1 or 2 min squads like your 5-mans, you can open the door for the cleanse objective very well because they can advance and then they're still eligible to shoot. They open the door for deploy teleport homers very well for that same interaction. They their melee isn't terrible, and with sustained hits, if you empower them, you can just fish for 6s and try to get as many hits on things as you can, and like just you'll do damage. With 2 damage attacks, you're gonna do damage to something. The downside is that they're only really good into like maybe bikes or infantry in melee. So again, going back to your comment, James, like Hellions would be really good into bikes in melee. Like, yeah, a lot of bikes are T5. Some of them are going to be T4. But if you've got a brick of them, like 10's a big points commitment, don't get me wrong. But if you have 10, you're rolling 30 dice with rerolls and 6s explode. You're just going to put enough wounds on it that they can't make them all. And even if it's a 5-man, right? 15 attacks, you're going to average 10. You're going to re-roll 5 of them, and then you're going to average 3 more is 13. Out of your 13, you're going to get on average 2 6s. So you're actually going to get roughly 100% hit rate with them. And then you're going to put 5 wounds on average onto something with a 5-man. 5 neg 1s into a Space Marine bike means that's 4 up saves. That means they're going to take on average about 5 to 6 damage. So the downside is that you're only killing maybe 1 or 2 bikes with a 5-man, but the upside is that like you can double that with 10, right? But again, now we're talking about a massive point commitment. And that's why I think Hellions need to come down. Losing infantry and everything that made them special and then staying roughly the same points makes them kind of poopy. But if you take a 5-man, like I said, you do open the door to some secondary interactions that they are very well suited for because of the ability to advance. And if we have time, I might touch on that later. But let's dig into the next unit. Venoms. All right. Let's not do Venoms. Let's do Witches and Lilith. And then we'll jump to Rax and the Homunculus, and then we'll do the Venoms and then the Cabalites, because the Venoms, the Cabalites, and then what I want to talk about after are all going to kind of segue together. So let's go into Witches. They kind of suck, guys. Real talk. And that makes me sad. They are 110 points for 10, so 11 points a model. Tyler, are you still on here, buddy? They move 8. They're T3, 6 up save. So again, this didn't change. They lost access to all of their special weapons. They just have Hecatari blades right now. Their no escape is actually pretty solid. It doesn't work on monsters and vehicles, which is fine. But if something wants to fall back from witches, they have to make a desperate escape test, right? And it counts as if they're battle shocked. So they fail it on 1s and 2s. And then if they are actually battle shocked, they'll fail it on 1s, 2s, and 3s. So this is actually a really cool ability, and I like it a lot. They have the 4-up invuln in melee still. But this sucks right here. Strength 3, -1, 3 attacks. The Hecatari blade doesn't give you a bonus attack anymore. And again, I understand within the context of 10th, things in melee got toned down. But this sucks even in the context of 10th. They went from potential strength 4 to only strength 3. They lost access to a bonus strength. They lost access to up to 2 bonus attacks. They lost access to a bonus toughness. They lost access to the +1 ballistic skill and +1 weapon skill or whatever. But all the other buffs they lost access to. They lost access to all their special weapons that made them cool. They lost access to advance and charge outside of a strat. And they just suck. Like, I hate to say it, because this is one of my favorite units in this codex. Or index. Well, not the index, obviously, but in Drukhari. I love witches. They suck. And I'm just going to be flat out honest with you. At 110 points, man, the only reason I take them is to take a succubus to get that extra pain token. They do have some utility, but they're not going to do much damage. So there is that. At strength 3, they'll maybe chip some wounds on some Marines, because, like, what are we looking at here? 30 attacks, hitting on 3s, so 20 hits, wounding on 5s, so about 6 wounds. So you're going to do on average about 3 to 4 damage to a Space Marine squad. Cool, man. I did 30 points of damage, maybe 40 points worth of damage to a unit, and then they're going to turn around and I'm going to pick up most of my witches, right? Because the return swings are just going to devastate me. So they don't play the trading game very well at all by themselves. In order for them to even be viable from a competitive standpoint, they need a succubus or they need Lilith. I personally think unless you're just taking like the bare minimum you need, you take Lilith. Lilith is solid. She's only strength 3, but she is anti-infantry 2. So she will devastate infantry. And she's strength 3, anti-infantry 2. She's 8 attacks. She's AP 2. When she's leading a unit, the whole unit has fight first. She has fight first by herself. And then the whole unit adds 1 to the strength, and the AP gets improved by 1. So Lilith goes to strength 4, anti-infantry 2, but she also goes to neg 3. So at 8 attacks, anti-infantry 2, she is going to kill Marines by herself. Where the witches will go to strength 4, neg 2, so now their dice are actually a lot better. and then once per game until the end of a phase, she can go to 12 attacks and get a 3-up invuln. So again, she is worth her 105 points if you're going to bring witches, because she just makes the witches better, right? I'm not sold on them being good. I'm just saying she makes them better. There are some ways to use them. Like I got them into combat and they did damage, but I had Lilith. I think the design philosophy was split them into Venom and use them as a nuisance unit type. So the downside to crap like Tau is that all their shit's vehicles now, so all the special rules that we have don't interact with them. We can't prevent them from falling back, and they can just shoot out of combat. Like all their battle suits are just vehicles. So it's just I don't disagree with your logic. I just think Tau is not the right example because they don't do anything into Tau. What I will say is witches. Um, the downside to splitting them up, like you said, James, is going to be that even just like regular intercessors without chainswords are going to dick them off the table because they're still just T3 bodies, and Space Marines get infinite rerolls and infinite attacks. Right? It's just so many dice, and it's hitting on threes, rerolling, wounding on threes. So it's one of those where it's like I can't make that many 4-up invulns if it's a 5-man unit. Where I do see a lot of utility for witches, though, is if you can pin units like Desolators or like some kind of hyper shooty unit and force them to fall back or just stay tied up. But that's about it. That's about the only interaction I can see is like trying to tie up shooty infantry units. But the problem is that's not where the game's really sitting right now. The game's sitting on a lot more vehicles and monsters. But no, I think Lilith, to me, if you're taking witches, she's going to be an auto take. I also think Succubus. I also think I'm gonna take witches. I'm gonna continue to take them. I like them. Like I don't like them as far as their strength, but I will continue to kind of play them and see what kind of utility I can squeeze out of them. The regular succubus is weird because she just gives them sustained hits, and then if they're empowered, they get fight first, and that's pretty solid. Sustained hits is pretty solid, and so like again, not bad. But I just think with Lilith giving them +1 strength and an additional AP, like she's just better. Uh, like I said, the data slate is out early July. Games Workshop did announce that. Hopefully there's a few tweaks to our units and not just points adjustments, but even points adjustments to some of these units would go a long way. Like witches need to be about 90 points a unit right now. I feel like paying upgraded witch prices for witches that can't get upgraded, right? And maybe we're not. It just feels that way. But that's kind of my take on witches. I honestly, generally speaking, I'd probably leave them at home outside of a single unit, and I'd only bring that single unit if I planned on putting either a succubus or Lilith into the army, just to get that extra pain token. And the pain tokens are worth it, guys. They're 100% worth it. But there are other ways of getting them, right? You don't have to bring a succubus to get that bonus one to start the game. You could just leave her at home and spend the 200 points you'd spend on the succubus and the witches on something else. Unfortunately. Now, if you're a clown like I am, you'll just keep playing them and then get pissed off when they keep being bad. All right. So Venoms and Cabalites and the Archon. This is going to be kind of a long dive. Because we're going to be segueing from their utility and into some concepts I had for a list. Venoms are cool, man. They are super cool. Stealth makes them -1 to hit. They still have a 6-up invul, and I know it was 5-up before, but it's all the time. They deep strike in 9th. Witches had Coven rules. Do you think that could happen later in 10th? I think once the Codex comes out, it's going to get fleshed out a lot more. I don't know how that's going to interact. You know, uh, I don't know if it's going to be like if you take this detachment, your witches get this, your homunculus get this, your cabalites get this, or if it's going to be if you take all witches, you get this. But yes, I think once the codex comes out, everything gets fleshed out a lot more. Drukhari have a very generic feel, and that's what's weird about the indexes, right? Is that there's some of them that just feel very generic, and some of them that almost feel like a fully fleshed out codex. Like the Chaos Space Marines index feels like a very fleshed out codex almost because of the uh, dark pacts and stuff like that. Craft Worlds kind of feel like a fleshed out codex. They just kind of have some bonkers interactions. Um, Orcs kind of feel like a fleshed out codex, but that's basically because they just copy pasted the Orc codex to the index, and that's not a joke. Um, Death Guard feel very generic and samey, so it's really weird. But I do think once the codex drops, we will see some things getting fleshed out. Like we might see a return of the Blades for Hire, where like Incubi don't get your army rules, but they get this or that, right? Like, and that might be what you end up seeing is like Incubi in a real space raid get the power from pain, but Incubi and the other detachments don't get your power from pain bonus, right? So, again, I'm not saying that's the way it is. I'm just saying these are interactions I could foresee if I had to guess. But I will tell you, yes, once books start dropping, rules will get fleshed out a lot more. All right, so we've got the Venom, Athletic Aerialists. I'm going to just summarize what this says. Basically, it says if you have a Drukhari infantry unit within 6 inches, and it's actually probably wholly within 6. Let me actually double check that. Wholly within 6 inches. If it has 6 or less models, it can get back in the transport, as long as it's not engaged. So you can, for example, fly your Venom up, disembark your Cabalites, shoot them, and then re-embark your Cabalites if you so desire. And this is just one example of what you could do, right? I'm not going to dig into all the weird interactions that creates, but that's just one example. And you say, why would you want to do that? Well, it keeps your Cabalites from getting dicked off the table from bolt guns, right? They at least have to chew through the Venom first. So there's a few reasons why you might choose to do that. The Venom also has special transport rules. And if you don't know what Combat Squad is, it's a rule Space Marines get that lets them break a squad in half. The Venom effectively lets you Combat Squad your Cabalites or a unit of Witches. And I haven't tried running Witches in Venoms, James. I think that was a good take, and I might give that a try just to have smaller units to kind of get up the board and do various things. I don't think that's a bad take, and just try to turn my Witches more into a utility unit rather than a damage dealing unit. I just don't like playing that way. Makes me sad. All right, so what I ended up doing was taking all my special weapons. Let's go to Cabalites. Cabalites. Oh, yeah. How about I don't do it that way? Boop, boop. Court of the Archon. Court of the Archon. All right, so Cabalite Warriors. Each squad. So this kind of stinks like big poopy duty. I'm not gonna lie. That it's so restricted to what's in the box, but that's how pretty much every index is right now, so that's what we have to deal with. But in a 10-man Cabalite squad, you can get one Splinter Rifle, or one Blaster, one Dark Lance, one Shredder, one Splinter Cannon. What I did in my games was I combat squatted them. The first game I kind of messed up and didn't have the Archon on the table when I started. Fixed that the second game. But again, irrelevant. First game, what I did was put all the special weapons in the Venoms, and then the Venoms just became gunboats, right? They just flew around. That gave them 3 splinter cannons when they shot, 1 shredder, 1 dark lance, 1 blaster. Had no complaints. Was pretty solid, right? Could empower the Venom, and it became a pretty solid little shooting platform. What I did the second game was put the special weapons on the table and put splinter rifles in. And again, it was fine. I have no complaints. If I had to do it over again and I were going to do it with the exact same list, I'd probably put the special weapons. I'd put 1 special weapon on the table with the Archon, and then I'd put 1 special weapon in the Venom. And then the other Venom would get splinter rifles. The splinter rifle guys I use more as like stay on the table, grab objectives kind of units. And then that's kind of how I played it. It was fine. They kind of did what they needed to do. I had no issues with their interaction. But after both games, I started thinking about different ways I could make this interact. I was like, okay, so like this is cool, but if I'm already bringing 2 Venoms, right? Or I think my list had 3 Venoms, but 1 had my Incubi and Drazar. If I'm already bringing 2 Venoms, what if I drop the Ravager and bring a Raider? And so here's why I was thinking that. The Ravager gets 3 Dark Lances. It does re-roll its own hit rolls of 1 innately. Whereas this just auto advances 6, but it doesn't have assault weapons, so who heckin' cares, right? And it can't advance and charge because it's not a Witch Cult unit. Like, that was another thing that kind of nerfed the shit out of this army, is none of the vehicles can get the witch stuff. Like, I can't use the witch strat on them. Their blade veins are really kind of poopy now. They don't have the grizzly trophies. They don't get the phantasm grenade launcher upgrade. Like, again, a lot of the things that made these good units got stripped away. I can't give it splinter racks, and even if I could, it wouldn't matter because splinter rifles aren't rapid fire anymore. So again, it's just a lot of the things that made Raiders really good got taken away, and they were just like, here's a transport. It's basically a truck, and at that point, I need to be being charged truck prices for it. Like, these things need to sit about 70 points, maybe 75. Trucks are about 50. Yeah, it moves 15 or 14, and it flies, and it has a Dark Lance, and it's firing deck. But again, it's just 90 points is too much for this platform. Maybe 80. It's not terrible, but then, like I said, anyway, getting on a rant, I digress. What I started to think was like, okay, what if I just put splinter rifles in the Venoms? And then I just put 2 5-man special weapons in the Raider. Because now the Raider has 3 Dark Lances, but then it also has 2 Splinter Cannons, and then it also has 2 Blasters, and then it also has 2 Shredders. And then that actually becomes like a genuinely scary gun platform that has a lot of tools in it that can do a lot of different things. And if you empower it, you can still get your rerolls with your 3 Dark Lances. Yeah, they hit on 4s, 2 of them, instead of 3s, because they're the infantry Dark Lances. But again, you're still averaging 2 to 3 hits every time you shoot it if you empower it, and you're still averaging 2 hits every time you shoot it if you don't empower it. So it's not the end of the world. And if you choose to go with the disintegrator cannons, that's also fine. But I would probably still take the Dark Lance, and then I could have 3 Dark Lancers and 2 Blasters. The Blasters are only Strength 8, but again, it's just extra D6 damage dice is what we're looking at. I'm going to be play testing that at some point. It is a points investment, right? Like, I still have to run 2 Venoms in order for it to work, but I'm not disappointed in it. I think it'll be fine, and I think that 1 Raider for its 90 points plus we'll call it 120 points for the boys inside, because it is a 10-man squad inside effectively, is a lot of scary shooting, right? My other thought was to do this. Oh, yeah. That is not where that is. So let's pull up the old Tantalussy, as the kids say. Nobody says that. I'm sorry. I'm the worst kind of human. In ninth, oh, yeah, I already answered that. Cool. 10th ed rules. Let's take a look here. Do I have the Imperial Forge World? Drukhari Forge World. Awesome. Tantalus. Let's take a look at this handsome boat. It's firing deck 16. It's a transport 16. It's 230 points, so it's a little spicy on the points. It has a 5-up invulnerable save instead of the 6-up invulnerable save. It's interesting that it's up here instead of down here, but whatever. It still gets its 12 shots, and it's strength 10, neg 2, 2 damage. So it's actually got solid shooting. It's not amazing, but it's solid. Like, I won't complain about it. And then its melee actually doesn't suck complete assholes like the Venoms and the Raiders do. It's not amazing, but it's not terrible, right? Scything charge. When it makes a charge, you roll a d6. On a 2 or a 3, you do a d3 mortals. On a 4 or 5, you do 3. And then on a 6, you do d3 plus 3. So it just kind of has the old shock prow interaction. So again, not terrible. It's T10, so I'm pretty sure the highest toughness in the whole army. It moves 16, it still flies, and it's 18 wounds. So, and you can still LFR it, whatever the -1 to hit strat, right? So again, it's a point sink, and I don't know if it's going to be good. It's a huge model. If you have one, you know. So it's still going to be hard to maneuver around a table because of the way Fly now interacts. But we're not taking it to charge things necessarily. I can put those same 2 model special weapons from my catalog, or 2 5-man special weapon teams for my Cabalites. So we can add 2 Dark Lances to it. We can add 2 Blasters to it, and we can add 2 Shredders to it, and we can add Dark Lance Blaster, 2 Splinter Cannons to it. And then if I really want to get like stupid with the points, I could put a 3rd 5-man Cabalite squad in it. It does inherently deep strike, so you can just put it down, right? Like you can just keep it off the board and put it down turn 2. You can rapid ingress it and put it down in your opponent's turn 2 if they go first. Like there's some good interactions there that'll make it pretty solid. And then you can put, so you have options. I'm thinking I put a 5-man of Rax in it and probably a Homunculus. I don't necessarily need the Homunculus, but the 5-man of Rax will also give me 1 Hex Rifle, it'll give me 1 Ossifector, and it'll give me 1 Liquefier, in addition to all the other bullshit that'll be coming out of this when it shoots. So again, I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I think it's going to be absolutely hilarious. I ran that thing in 9th edition, like late 9th, when everybody was telling me it was bad. And I was still doing really well with it, right? I was still like 2-1 at tournaments. I went 3-1 in a 4-round league. Like, I was still doing really well with this bad unit simply because I just learned how to use it. And that's going to go a long way for you guys. Is like, if there's something in this army that you like, if there's a will, there's a way, right? Like, if you're just a stubborn dumbass like I am, you will figure out a way to make it work. But I think, again, it's a huge point sink because you need the Venoms, you need the Tantalus, you need the troops to go inside of it. And it's just going to suck up a lot of things that your army, a lot of resources that you could be putting in other things for your army. So do I think it's the most competitive way to play? No. But I think it's going to be good. Like I don't think it'll. Let me rephrase. I don't think it'll be bad. I think it could do some damage. You could really wreck shop. Like if you bring it from Deep Strike and you give it a empower token, a pain token, and give it rerolling its hits, you're going to be able to just kind of put a lot of damage on things that you probably shouldn't be able to. The Strength 10 gun is just 12 shots by itself. And again, like even just that is like, man, that makes me think I might put it back on the table. So I'm going to be playing against Kronz, I think, later today. I'm probably going to run a Tantalus list, and I'll let you guys know how that goes. I actually will be building my list for that in a little bit. I'm not going to tailor to him. I don't do that. I don't list tailor. I try to build as generalist a list as I can so that if I go to a tournament with it, I know that I can have tools for different matchups. Now, holy cow, how far into this are we? I bet we're real far, friend. Where's my timer? An hour and a half. It's 10:10 here. I think this is a good place to wrap this up. This was an extremely long video already. Hopefully everybody got some insights. Hopefully everybody liked the video. I appreciate, again, everybody coming and chilling out and hanging out with me. Just a heads up, I will have that Witch Cult video up by the end of the weekend. And hopefully I'll have some game recaps for everybody. And I'll probably do some secondary interactions. Um, I'll probably do a video on that, and I might do a live discussion on that early next week. And then I'll be in Tacoma in 2 weeks working the US Open for Games Workshop. So you won't hear from me probably that whole week. So, again, thanks for hanging out. Appreciate the community. You guys are